In this video, I'm going to show you how to teach the flip finish.
Alright, in this video I'm going to show you how to teach that in a few simple steps. So one of the things we're going to need is going to be a leash. Now I don't want this leash to be long and clunky. I want it to be somewhere between 3 to 6 feet. 6 feet is even a little bit too long, so anywhere between 3 to 4 feet is ideal, but most people have a 6-foot leash, so the 6-foot leash works fine too. The other thing we're going to need is a star mark collar. I'm going to explain why. All the star mark collar is, it's a polymer pinch collar. So the star mark collar is basically a milder version of the prong collar, and I'm going to cover why I prefer that over this when teaching this behavior. Now you might be wondering, why use that? Why not use any other method that does not involve a collar or a leash? We can certainly do that. I actually have videos on how to do just that, but this is just another approach. The way I'm going to show you in this video is ideal for dogs that are a little bit older, dogs that are not young puppies. The reason why it works a little bit better with older dogs is because you're not having to spend a ton of time and thousands of repetitions for them to learn it. When you have a puppy, you have those thousands of repetitions. But with an adult dog, sometimes you want to get things going a little bit faster, and we can do it in a nice, humane way.
Alright, so I'm going to show you here with Luna in a little bit of slow motion. I have the star mark collar with the hardware facing down. My hand has to be there. You have to pay attention to how I'm doing it. I'm stepping back with my left leg, and I'm using a wall as a little bit of guidance. So I'm going to do a few more of those here in a second. And when I'm doing this, I'm not saying the verbal cue. I'm not saying anything. I'm just doing the mechanics. And we're going to do that a bunch of times. Now I can do this by grabbing food with my left hand. I'm going to still grab the leash in the same place. I'm going to do the mechanics that way. I'm spinning the dog, stepping back with the left leg, and when the dog completes the turn, the dog is getting paid with food. And we just do this over and over and over and over. Now we're going to add the verbal cue. Listen to the timing there.
Heel.
So the verbal cue has to be just before the mechanics. I don't want to do it at the same time.
Heel.
The verbal cue right before the mechanics announces to the dog what's going to happen.
Heel.
And we'll do this a lot. Now stay to the end. There's an example with the larger dog.
Why not use a flat collar, a buckle collar? The reason I don't like to use the buckle collar is if I do the maneuvers that I did in those videos, it's easy for the dog to slip out of it, and even if I tighten it, I end up doing it for the dog a little bit too long. There is no sense of urgency for the dog. So I want a little bit of a sense of urgency so the dog has this desire to escape that mild pressure that I'm putting on the star mark collar. Now, why am I not going to use something else like, a slip collar? A lot of people will think, well, this is more ideal because it's not quite a pinch collar and it's not quite a flat collar, so why don't we just use this? The reason I don't like to use the slip collar or the slip leash when teaching that behavior is that you will actually end up choking the dog a lot more. So as you're maneuvering this and you're doing it with this, you're actually choking the dog and making the exercise a little bit too uncomfortable, which I don't want the exercise to be uncomfortable. Now the obvious question is, why not just use the prong collar? Well, the prong collar is going to make the exercise a little bit too uncomfortable. So if I do the maneuvers that I did in those videos with the prong collar, what ends up happening is the dog ends up being a little bit too uncomfortable. And if the dog is very uncomfortable during the exercise, they start focusing less and less on the mechanics, and they start to focus more and more on their own comfort, so they don't want to even do the exercise, which is why I don't start with the prong collar. So to me, the star mark collar is ideal because it gives me just enough emphasis that it makes the dog go, okay, we're moving. I need to get going with this exercise so I can get paid. It gives them a sense of urgency, but it doesn't quite beat them down either. It doesn't make them uncomfortable to the point that they don't even want to eat. It doesn't make them uncomfortable to the point that they're miserable. So that's why I like the Starmark collar. So the exercise is going to focus on mechanics. We're doing it in a way that the dog only has one option, and that option is to do it the way we want him to do it. So for this, I'm going to use a wall. I'm going to use a leash. I'm strategically placing my hand on a certain part of the leash, and you're gonna see in the video, it's exactly where I want it. And I am maneuvering the dog's head to come into this position. Now, I can do this on the left side or the right side, or I could do it on both. So if I'm gonna do both sides, I'm gonna pick one side at a time. The point of this exercise is for the dog to just do these repetitions the way you want him to do it, and doing it hundreds of times, literally hundreds and hundreds of times. You're gonna do it so much that the dog will start to anticipate. The dog will start to develop muscle memory. And as you're adding this emphatic pressure, remember, you're not correcting the dog, but as you're adding this emphatic pressure, the dog starts to recognize what you're gonna be doing next because you've done it 50 other times. So you're gonna be doing it again and again and again. And the dog will start to build some muscle memory, will start to anticipate, and then will start to beat you to it, as you'll see on the videos. Now, each session is going to be anywhere from 5 to 10 minutes. 10 minutes, a little bit on the long end. 10 minutes is actually a long time. Even 5 minutes, it's quite a long time. So some of the sessions that I do, I'll just put my timer and I'll go, I'm gonna do this for 5 minutes straight. The other thing I'll do is I'll give myself a repetition goal. So instead of putting a 5-minute timer, what I'll do is I'll go, I'm gonna do 30 repetitions. So I'm gonna do that 30 times total, over and over and over and over, and then the session's over, and then the next session will be either later that day or another time. But I wanna do this frequently. I don't wanna do a session today, and then my next session be 3 days later, and then my session after that be 6 days later. There's not continuity there. I want there to be continuity. I want the dog to memorize the mechanical pattern enough so the dog goes, I know exactly what you're gonna do, so I'm gonna do it for you instead. That's the goal, and that's how the dog gets to that nice, crisp flip finish that looks really nice when you tell him to heel.
In this example, I'm doing it a little bit different because this dog is much longer. German Shepherds or other longer dogs tend to make the mechanics a little bit difficult, so watch what I'm doing here. Watch the placement of the leash. The leash is right behind me, and I'm using my leg and my hips to make the turn. I'm facing the dog every time, so the mechanics are a little bit different. And I'm still using the Starmark collar, and I'm still doing this with emphasis and a little bit of speed. The leash is nice and short. This leash is about 4 feet long, so it's not a 6-foot leash. And again, it's important that you watch the placement. Now, here's what happens after several repetitions. The dog starts to offer it on its own. But my leash placement still where I need it to be, and I'm still pulling on the leash a little bit. Now, to wrap it up, I also want to mention that in both cases, these two examples with the Pitty and the German Shepherd, this requires hundreds and hundreds of repetitions. As a matter of fact, by the time I did these sessions on video, these dogs have already gone through the hundreds and hundreds of repetitions. So if your sessions don't look as smooth as mine in that video, that doesn't necessarily mean that you're doing it wrong. It just means that your dog might need to get used to the mechanics. So this is where the repetition after repetition after repetition, this is where that will kick in. So in the beginning, it looks pretty ugly at first with some dogs, and then it gets smoother and smoother as the repetitions go on.